Hey, it's Future Jensen here, and yeah, this video looks really weird because copyright's a thing, I guess, and this video got completely blocked, so that's why it's a day late and why it looks weird. Also, I don't know what the cooking segment is. I was a little insane when I made this video. Anyway.
And now for our feature presentation.
It's no secret that my favourite TV show of all time is The Simpsons, with the early years of my life being when the second wave of The Simpsons craze hit pop culture, with The Simpsons movie releasing and the family returning to the public eye once again. But it was when I was 6 or 7 maybe, when my brother decided to make The Simpsons his favourite thing ever, and whatever he liked, I liked. Lego, Halo, Mario Kart, it didn't matter, but most of all, of course, The Simpsons. We bought the merchandise, drew the characters, played the games, which I might do a video on, and read the comics. Like, look how many comics I have here. Like, that's a lot, and they each cost like £4 or £5 each. I don't know how much we spent, but it's a lot. Just look at this pile. So it's not hard to say, we were obsessed. It's actually kind of embarrassing to say I've watched every episode of The Simpsons ever, with probably like 80% of them being rewatched more times than I can count. I don't even want to begin to predict how many days, weeks, or even months of my life I've spent watching The Simpsons. So it's not an understatement to say that I've got a lot to say when it comes to The Simpsons. And I'll probably make a ton of videos on this show in the future, so there's probably a playlist somewhere if you're watching this a while after this video was released. Okay, so you've read the title of the video and you already know what I'm about to talk about. And yes, it's true. I enjoy the later seasons of The Simpsons. I know, what a weirdo, but before you jump to those conclusions, just hear me out. As I was saying, me and my brother love this show, but naturally, my brother began to take interest in other shows and other stuff, but I couldn't stop watching it. I was genuinely obsessed. It got to a point where I would wake up before school, like way too early, and watch like 4 episodes before school, and then get home from school and watch another 8 episodes, give or take. And yeah, it's kinda sad, but I was like 10, and there's not a lot to do when you're 10, so just keep that bit in mind. But these episodes that I watched weren't on some box set or DVD, they were just reruns, meaning I didn't really have any choice of what season or episode I was watching. As long as it was yellow and 20 minutes long, I didn't care. Also, if you're wondering how I managed to watch 12 episodes a day just from reruns, well, there's this itty bitty thing called a series link, which means every episode, no matter what channel it was on, was recorded. My TV box's storage was only used for The Simpsons. I think my record was 376 recorded episodes, if I remember correctly, which is a lot. It's around half the full catalogue of episodes currently. Anyway, as I just mentioned, I didn't get any choice in what episode was recorded, so I just watched them all. And as I grew up and started using the internet more, I realised that people don't like The Simpsons anymore. There were videos on how Season 9 ruined it, and how everyone hates every episode after Principal and the Pauper, and looking at it now, yeah, I agree. Season 9 onwards just turned stale after the show went through writer changes and just ran into loads of dead ends. I mean, the whole point of The Simpsons in the first place was to be a satire of the family sitcoms of the late 80s and early 90s, subverting audiences' expectations, and instead showed what a true American family was like. In doing so, being solidified in the timeless art form that is animation. And the golden age of The Simpsons was great. I mean, come on, Brad Bird! And yeah, after season 9 things got a little iffy, but I feel as though people just jump on the bandwagon and say that everything after season 9 is complete trash, after just watching a couple popular videos on the subject without actually doing any solid research. And by that I mean just watching the show. And if you don't want to sit through 8 full days of Simpsons content for whatever reason, or have to watch Disney Plus's annoying crop version of the show that feels like you're constantly 3 inches away from the screen, Jesus Disney, how did you let this happen? Then keep watching this video, because we're going to see where this show went wrong and why the later seasons are bad, but aren't that bad. Okay, so let's start with The Simpsons' first era, the early years, from the Tracy Ullman show to season 3. And honestly, these first 3 seasons are just good fun. And yeah, the animation's a bit rough and more janky, but it gives it character. Let's take Bart the General, the 5th episode of the first season, an episode which really hits home the idea of what the show means. So we start off with what seems like a classic predictable story arc of a cheesy family sitcom that this show is a satire of. It's your classic bully episode. We've seen it before. One kid in the family gets picked on, so another kid stands up for them and then gets bullied. And then the father character says something meaningful like, oh, you gotta stand up for yourself and blah blah blah. But this episode slowly subverts expectations of the audience when both Homer and Grandpa tell Bart he's just gotta beat up Nelson, resulting in Bart waging war on Nelson and then signing a peace treaty at the end. As I said, it subverts expectations of the audience that came for just a normal sitcom, but also having deeper themes of forever having childhood wonder and war. And honestly, looking at it from this perspective, no wonder this show has been running for 31 years. But where in those 31 years, in those 31 seasons, did things go wrong? Well, just wait, because first we gotta talk about what most people, myself included, believe to be the golden era of The Simpsons, which are season 3 through 8. So let's take season 6, episode 14, Bart's Comet. This episode deals with weirdly deep themes of the fragility of life, and jokes on the corruption of the government, which is really deep for a weekday night show. So in watching this episode, we see that the show has changed from the early years for the better, and instead of subverting expectations by taking storylines from the generic family sitcom, these seasons began to be satirical by just making up new and more outlandish narratives. This episode starts off as a normal sitcom would, with Bart up to his generic Dennis the Menace antics, but then quickly turns, with jokes mocking both the military in America at the time, and also the healthcare system. But after Bart discovers a comet which is heading right for Springfield, we see the characters of Springfield turn against each other and fight over their impending doom, and who gets to stay in the Flanders bunker. And if you haven't seen this episode before, then you might find it hard to believe that this episode ends with the characters of the show deciding to sacrifice their life because they don't think it's fair that Ned would die while they would live. I'm serious, this story beat literally solidifies the idea that the show itself can't function without all the residents of Springfield, despite the name of the show being focused on the Simpsons family. And if that wasn't deep enough, this episode ends with the comet burning up and not killing anyone due to pollution, but instead hitting and destroying the bunker that they were all just in. I know, right? Showing that if they didn't make the ultimate sacrifice, they would have died. Wait, what is this show? It's not hard to see why these are considered the golden era of The Simpsons. Like, there's some good, deep stuff in here. But like I said, the writers changed, and the show went downhill, with Principal and the Pauper in season 9 just neglecting the audience and the connections with the characters in the show by completely changing the story of Principal Skinner. However, this next era isn't awful. Yeah, sure, they lost track of the purpose of being a satire on family sitcoms, as well as the fact that family sitcoms weren't as big anymore, resulting in the show's core purpose becoming irrelevant. But at the end of the day, the characters still had charm and feeling, and hadn't yet transformed into a hollow shell of generic character, otherwise known as flanderized. So let's take a look at seasons 9 through 18, the pre-Simpsons movie era, and see why people regard these as where the show went wrong. I think the thing that makes this era so stale is the fact that they've run out of ideas. Remember when I said that in the golden era they ran out of generic sitcom storylines, so they made new original ones? Well, in this era they just decided to reuse old stories from their own show. Let's have a look at season 12, episode 4, Lisa the Tree Hugger. In this episode, Lisa becomes an environmentalist and attempts to save a tree from the rich Texan. They just took Lisa the vegetarian and made it trees, but instead of having deep meanings about how you shouldn't push beliefs on others, Lisa only wants to save the tree just because she has a crush on the guest star actor. It's so unoriginal, the writers just pieced together bits of old storylines to make a crappy new one. Alright, I have a lot of issues with this era, in this episode especially, so I'm gonna break down why it's so crap. We start this episode off with something that has absolutely nothing to do with the main story, and instead is just a way of panning out the runtime, which is something we see in this era, but also every other season after it. Even though when I was young I thought this was pretty cool, for some reason. What a dumbass. This episode's opening shows Bart wanting money for a new games console, and to get the money he works for some random racist one-off stereotype character. And this, apart from the one-off character, has literally been used like twice already in the show. Bart wants money so he does jobs. We've seen it before, but yet it's still here. But the thing is, it's completely unneeded, and it takes us 5 whole minutes of this episode to get to what the actual story is. What makes The Simpsons post season 8 bad? It's like taking away the first act of a movie and expecting it to be entertaining. And if you're a Simpsons connoisseur like me and are currently commenting about some episodes in the golden era do this too, then I'd say shut up. Because if we look at the golden era episodes, we see the openings always start with something to do with the story in one way or another. But in this episode, it's just useless crap that wastes the viewer's time and completely ruins the pacing of the story. And once we get into the actual story, we have to rush to the plot point of the tree getting struck by lightning, and everyone thinks Lisa is dead. Because of this, our main character gives up on her goal literally 3 minutes after getting it. After that, the episode just reuses the story beat of a character faking their own death, which we already saw in season 7's Mother Simpson. But at least in that episode, it dealt with Homer's feelings towards his mother leaving, and it was actually good. Jeez, the more you think about it, the worse this episode gets. But at the same time, it did keep me entertained for 24 minutes, and I mean, I was enjoying my time for the most part. Yeah, they're not great, the storylines are predictable, and the pacing is all over the place. But they're still Simpsons, and maybe I'm talking straight nostalgia vision, but I gotta say, this episode was actually pretty funny. I mean, a good handful of the jokes were just completely unfunny, however, there were a few funny ones sprinkled in, which actually made me laugh. Speaking of sprinkled...
I'm gonna start off with some Vegemite plus space sweet like brown if you want, but I can't find any flour. Then we're gonna get some white sugar and brown sugar to dip into cement and then mix a sprinkle the golden pastry. Give it all over chopping and put it in a hot frying pan. Set up a burn all things. And now for the frosting, we're gonna get some saffron butter, some cream cheese and cream it together with some powdered sugar. I have cream cheese, so whatever. Maybe a bit more butter. Also, add a bit of honey and then use it. Get them all together and throw that frosting in a piping bag, cut off the top and twist it over them, and there you go. Why did I do donuts considering I'm talking about The Simpsons? I don't know. That was weird. Anyway.
After the release of the Simpsons movie, the show hit a bit of a resurgence. As with the family returned into focus and the people beginning to care again, Matt Groening rekindled his love for the show, and there was actually some thought and effort put into the series again. I mean, for a couple of seasons. I'm not going to go into detail of these seasons, but just know that there were a few actual decent episodes in seasons 18 through like 21 to 22. But alas, we reached the present era of The Simpsons, the era regarded as the worst, a time that most people see as The Simpsons just sinking deeper and deeper into the grave with every episode. And I agree. Although the purpose of this whole video is to defend the later seasons, these episodes aren't good. The writers have just lost track of the characters and are still struggling to come up with new ideas. Let's take a look at episode 12 of season 30. This episode follows Lisa making a new friend and then trying to hide her family from a new friend and her parents because Lisa is embarrassed. Wow, how original! It's not like we've seen that storyline in other episodes. Lisa literally gets a new friend every other season, and the whole being embarrassed of a family thing has been used in more episodes than I can count. This particular episode starts off like a musical, with Lisa singing about how she wants to sit next to someone on the bus. Why? It's just pointless. This happens way too much in recent seasons. The rest of the episode has absolutely nothing to do with singing or musicals. It makes no sense at all. The episode goes on as you would expect, and with this episode, I think the writers just gave up because in the last few minutes the conflict is quickly resolved, and then Bart runs in the room and says, "Hey everyone, come look at my room," and then he throws a party. What? First off, this whole Bart room thing had nothing to do with the main plot, and it wasn't even a B plot. There was no B plot in this story. Bart had no part in this episode until the end. It's just awful. But, again, I was entertained. Yeah, I was constantly getting frustrated with how stupid the writing decisions were, but I wasn't bored, and it's got that going for it. At the end of the day, The Simpsons is and will always be the show that left the biggest impact on pop culture than any other. The earlier seasons are some of the best television in history. With its fleshed out world and memorable characters, The Simpsons is hands down my favourite show of all time. The innovative ideas make it endlessly rewatchable, and I'll always love the show for that. But should it be cancelled? Personally, yeah. I think The Simpsons' time is up, and I think it has been for a while. A second movie has already been confirmed, but with Matt Groening saying he would only make a second movie after the show had ended, it seems that the final episode is approaching faster than you think. And when the time comes and the show gets cancelled, which it eventually will, I hope people will remember the earlier episodes, the episodes that honestly changed the world in some ways. Believe me, I don't want the show to end. I don't want these characters that I've grown up with and been around longer than me just die and never come back. Wow, that sounds a little bit darker than I intended. But to all those people that have worked on the show over the past 31 years, thank you. But now Disney's got it, and I don't know what to make of that. They're probably going to milk it for the next 10 years and release the second movie exclusively to Disney+. Then after it's eventually cancelled, we're going to get a live-action remake, because that's what we want. Oh god, I just realised I've been complaining about the show reusing old storylines and not seeing that they're now in the hands of the king of reusing stories. Yeah, we should probably end this show as soon as possible. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. One of few, to be honest. I don't want to annoy you by asking for you to subscribe or like the video, but if you would, that would make my day so much better. I'm not sure where that cooking segment came from. I thought it was pretty funny. So as always, subscribe if you want. You don't have to.